can we talk a little bit about Romania and what's happening with Georgescu?
Right.
So can maybe just recap what's happening?
Okay. Well, first of all, it was, I guess, a couple of months ago that Georgescu he won the first round of presidential election. I guess there was going to be one more round that would determine the future president. He won the first one rather convincingly, and then polls began to show that he was actually going to win the second round. But his first round, they simply canceled it, is what they did. They annulled it. I guess that's the proper term. And then they canceled the second round. No, it was the Constitutional Court that did that. And they did it on the basis of, charges of Russian interference on his behalf. And they pointed to some TikTok videos. Now, this whole thing was absurd. And in fact, it was later revealed by Romanian media that those TikTok videos were not financed by the Russians, but rather by a liberal Romanian party that had some sort of, they were trying to play 5D chess, and the whole thing backfired on them. That's what it was. So the charge was spurious. It was ridiculous. But then, it was just very recently. I think it was the day that Georgescu was going to declare his candidacy. He was going to announce it officially, like he was going to go to the office and sign the papers or whatever. He was seized. He was taken out of his car in traffic, in public, detained, and his house was searched, and he was charged with, basically, I guess building a fascist party and just these very political kind of charges, really what it was. I think there may have been some fraud involved, but, they threw that in there, fraud charges, but it was basically political. You're the wrong kind of person, and we don't want you to be president. Now, just a couple of days ago, the Constitutional Court actually did approve his candidacy. But then it was the Electoral Commission rejected it and has struck him from the candidate list. So they have declared that he is not allowed to run for president. That happened very recently. I think it just happened yesterday. And there have been protests, quite significant protests. A lot of people in Romania are very angry. I think he can make an appeal to the Constitutional Court, and they have to make a decision within 48 hours.
We're seeing these terms, dictatorship and death of democracy, being thrown out a lot with regards to Romania. Do you think any of these apply? What would you describe?
Well, I don't think maybe some of that, I know those were statements that Georgescu himself made. And I think it's maybe somewhat overblown, but it is very serious. I mean, democracy is supposed to be a big part of what you're all about in the European Union. And this is clearly an anti-democratic, authoritarian move. It's simply ban a party, a candidate that you just didn't like, not for a real criminal offense. It's a political offense. Let's be honest about it. And this is what, Europe and the U.S. has a history of criticizing regimes around the world for. But that's what they're doing. And they've done it in Romania. They've threatened to do it in Germany. I think it's very alarming. I mean, if you're serious about democracy, this is a very worrying development, and it should worry people across the political spectrum. But, you tend to get silence on the left liberal side. I mean, I think they really like the idea of banning bad people on the other side. Unfortunately, this is what we're seeing. Yeah.
What do you think I feel like with the Romanian establishment, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they ban him like this, there's going to be more and more political unrest, upheaval, protest, and rightly so. And it's, it's clear that the United States is, J.D. Vance spoke directly about the threat to democracy in Romania. Yeah. Elon Musk is very vocal about this.
Right.
So there's a lot of global pressure. It's not just something that's kind of internalized where they can keep it quiet within Romania.
Yeah.
A spotlight's being shown on it. So I think it's going to have very damaging effects. But then if they do let Georgescu in, I'm sure everything they've done is going to have this boomerang effect on them, and he's going to be even more popular. It's kind of similar to what we saw with Trump. And then once he's in power, all the deep state there, the riot police and the establishment that annulled the election and pulled him out of his car, detained him, and the Electoral Commission, all that. The whole government is going to be under fire from this new guy that's in power that is going to be very pissed, and rightly so. I mean, it's like what we're seeing right here in America in some regards. Yeah. And I think we might see this start to pop up throughout Europe over time, with the AfD, the National Rally. It's just...
I think it... Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's it. I don't
know. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we're witnessing the unraveling of democracy, both in Europe and in the U.S. It's not that we have ceased entirely to be democracies, but because different groups have, adopted these extra constitutional means, let's put it that way. There was the Russia hoax was an attempted coup against Trump, and then there was the lawfare. And this ended up, creating the monster, at least from the Democrats' perspective, the monster of the new Trump, the Trump of the second term. He's come out, he's angry, he's come out swinging, and he is, he's making very extensive use of executive orders. And I think, a lot of them I like, and I think a lot of them are justified even, according to the Constitution, but there's many questionable ones. And I think that is a worrying development. It's easy, like when you're on one side, you see it and say, hey, I'm not going to worry about this. Yeah, maybe he's fudging the rules, or, he's not really conforming to the Constitution, but he's doing good stuff. But the problem is he sets a precedent. And when the Democrats come back, you may just see the same thing on the other side. I mean, there's a real risk with that. And then we really go down this road towards, not a constitutional government, but rather warring factions with their leaders that when they get into office don't respect any of the constraints that previous rulers accepted. You could say it's a road to civil war. That's, again, I'm not predicting anything in the near future, but it is, I think, a serious escalation, let's say, in the political battle within this country. And of course, you're seeing it in Romania too. They're doing this. Clearly, it's extra constitutional. They're banning this candidate. Yeah, but he is popular and it angers people. When he comes back, he's probably not going to be all that concerned about the Constitution himself, when he's been abused this way.
So what type of government do you think you would say the United States currently has, Romania currently has, and what do you think we'll be looking at in the future if you say that this is the unraveling of democracy?
What would you call it? I think you just have to say that we're in a transition phase. So it is an unraveling. It hasn't unraveled entirely. It's democratic, but that democracy is clearly, that edifice is crumbling, and we're seeing I don't know what's going to replace it. It just may end up being, we may end up having strong men supported by, whatever, one side or the other. I'm not going to make any predictions about the future. Let's say about that. I'll just say that it's unraveling. What's going to rise up in its place is hard to say.
Democracy has been elevated to almost a holy status, holy word in our Western society. But do you think that democracy is really the optimal form of governance? Should we be really afraid of the death of democracy? I mean, it sounds so scary to us in the West, but then you look at places like Singapore or... I was in China for 10 years. People think it's terrible, but I think it's pretty well run. Life is pretty good there.
Most of the Chinese certainly agree.
Right.
I'm not dogmatic about that. In general, I think it's good to have to at least have a large a democratic aspect to any kind of government. I think it's actually helpful, even for, let's say, an authoritarian government, to allow a certain amount of participation, by the people. It makes for a stronger government. Now, exactly how much that participation should be and in what form, I'm agnostic. I think that different governments maybe suit different cultures, different peoples, different stages of economic development. I'm not one who believes that this is the ultimate good. This is an absolute standard, because clearly there are some, historically and even in the present, as you pointed out, there are authoritarian, clearly non-democratic governments that have been very successful and have the support of their people. There's always a danger, of course, that you can have eventually. Now, these are. I think it's important to point out, like these countries like Singapore and China, just two that you mentioned, they're not dictatorships. It's not just one man rule. It's party rule. And this party has kind of developed a way of governing over time that has proved successful. And so I think you just have to recognize that reality. And then on the democratic side, it says, I think, like we've seen in our own country and in a lot of European countries, democracy can be subverted by elites, and I think it has been. That's the problem in places like Europe. You have the powerful people, that have control over the media and have the money, and they can determine the outcomes. Or even if there's an outcome that is not what they preferred, they can sabotage that outcome, and then eventually they have their way. And we've seen it again and again. We've talked about the elections in France and in Germany. There's just a lot of games that they can play to really maintain power. And you can see, in this country, I know there was a study that was done, maybe it was 10 years ago, just like what the difference between policies and actually public preferences. And then on a whole, a long list of things, there was a clear divergence. It's just not the elites had their way. The electorate, if you looked at them, you ask them about many questions, whether it's immigration or whatever. They have a very clear preference, but their preferences were never implemented as policy. It's because elites had a different preference. So they played their game. They let these elections happen. But then when all was said and done, whoever was elected continued to pursue the policies preferred by the elites. And that's partly because, a lot of it is money. To win an election in the U.S. or, you have to have a great deal of money. And so these candidates really listen to their donors more than they do, the voters. They'll say things to the voters, but they understand, who's paying the piper, and they play the tune when it comes. I think that's largely been true. And then also, it's not just a matter of money. I think it's also kind of a matter of status. It's just like, these candidates generally are part of the same class of people, and they tend to have one way of looking at the world, which is different from what the majority, the unwashed masses, the way that they look at the world. And find the same thing in Europe. And now over time, this gap between, let's say, the elites and the masses has grown to such an extent that, the masses are catching on, and you're getting the rise of populist candidates, people like Trump and Georgescu.
Guys, thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please check out my website, nobliski.io. You can look at the pinned comment below. It's something that I think you'll find useful. Even my dad uses it. My wife uses it. Instead of Googling things, you should be using this website because you get access to OpenAI, Perplexity, Anthropic, DeepSeek. There's hundreds of models that you can use. It's what I use to create the thumbnail images, things like this. And the greatest thing about it is there's no rate limits. There are no subscription fees. It's free to try out and use. You get free tokens every day. So if you're not a heavy AI user, you will never have to pay for anything. But this is really my passion project. I really want to get it off the ground, and I think you guys would like it. So yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have time to download the apps and give it 5 stars, that'd mean a lot to me as well. Thanks a lot.